Now, because the Hanogas HaYichud is such a complex and a contradictory type of Hanoga, we've got to go by step. I think I've spoken about the Hanogas HaYichud already 3 times. We had 3 shum on it. And last week we had a very fundamental shir on Hanogas HaYichud. The material of Hanogas HaYichud is covered in the series 2, in the first 3 pages. In the first 3 pages of series 2, it covers all these various different aspects of Hanogas HaYichud, builds it up to a point. So those who have series 2 should be listening to the first 3 pages, series 2, page 1, 2, and 3. Now, last week we were speaking about functions of Hanogas HaYichud and the way that it goes about doing what it does. It's one of the basic concepts. Remember what we spoke about last week was that the Hanogas HaYichud must function in secrecy, well, so to speak, figuratively, in privacy. And what it is a hidden process which God unfolds through history. But it's hidden. Hidden from who? It's hidden from us, mankind. It's even hidden from Malachim. It's hidden from all except God Himself, from the inner workings of the problem. And it must be like that. Now, why is that? Now, I'd like to go into some of the basic concepts tonight about its internal secrecy and some of the inner processes. We all know, and we said this many times, that the world is built on justice, or din. Hanogas HaMishpat, to create the situation, to remove the problem of Nam V'Sufa. Who wants to review? Okay. Meaning that man must earn his Olam Haba. God will not give it gratis. God says to man, I will give you the greatest Hatova possible, you must earn it. That's the concept of Mishpat. And the Hanogas HaMishpat sets up this entire thing. Now, if man fails to earn it, then we have big problems. And the Hanogas HaYichud, which is the Hanoga, or the activity of God, which is designed to bring the ultimate Yichud one way or another. We went into this whole thing last week, the concept of Yichud, it must come one way or the other. You all remember this? It's a very, very critical thing. What we said last week is very, very critical. If you remember and you understand what we said last week, you will have in your hand a very powerful principle. A concept of Yichud. Olam Haba is nothing more than a place of the revelation of Yichud. That's all it really is. And what the Buddha says is that I want to bring Olam Haba, I want to bring a time and a place which has the total revelation of my unity. That is the greatest ecstatic experience. But the Buddha says, how I will manifest that Yichud depends on you. I will put you in a situation, in a problem situation, and you will be forced to choose whether you want to accept my yichud, my sovereignty, my will, and establish your relationship in terms of me, rather establish the truth of your relationship by knowing who I am and who you are, or confusing that relationship and attempting to establish your own independence. In essence, being master yichudai, removing my unity. So we said that the essence of the whole matter lies in what's called Gilu Yichud, or the revelation of the unity of God, or Hester Yichud, the concealment of that. Man has the ability to choose one or the other, and as man struggles in the attempt to choose between his will and God's will, essentially he either reveals the absolute existence of God, or he negates it, and therefore conceals it. The direct result of that is what is given to him in Olam Haba. If he himself reveals the unity of God, then he will be zech, he will merit a situation or a position when he will see that unity in all its incredible power and glory. That is the greatest simcha of all. So it's the greatest simcha of all because it is what is behind every pleasure, even in this world. You don't realize it. It's something we have to discuss on a much deeper level. But what you don't have to understand is that every pleasure that you get now, right, while you're in your body in this world, is nothing more than an outflow through yichud. That's really what it is. Except that it's yichud through the body. It's a very subtle thing. And it's one of the most subtle things of the Yetzer Hara, which confuses constantly. What is that? It's the concept that once God said that Olam Haba will be a place of toiv, and the Baruch said that that toiv rests on the perception of me. What does that mean, the perception of me? What does that mean? Really? It's the perception of His unity. The perception of God's unity is the essence of all pleasure. Not only the pleasure of Olam Haba, but the pleasure of Olam Hazeh. Except that here it's invisible. And it's the greatest trick ever played on human mind. It can put every magician, every sorcerer to shame. And that trick is played by the Satan. Because you know what the Satan does? The Satan means the evil inclination. I really want to save it for a different time. But the truth of the matter, the subtlety is so enormous that I think I'd like to give it now. I have to let the cat out of the bag now. It's important to do that. When God set up the world, you see, when was the world? No, push over here. Yeah, I got a hat. Listen to this very carefully. When the Baruch set up the world, He wanted to set up a situation where man has the ability to choose. What is the ability of that choice? Essentially, the choice rests in Gila Yichud or Hesed Yichud. The choice rests in man's desire to connect with God or disconnect from God. It is desire to see God as He is in terms of understanding His real relationship with God and the absolute finality and totality of God's existence, and how He is absolutely dependent on the Baruch for existence, or the negation of that, but the attempt to see oneself in one's own independence and one's own power, false as it is. You see. So He said, I'm going to give man the test. You know, but that sounds great. But how do you do that? You don't realize the enormous problem that God has. And I say this figuratively. But it is an enormous problem. Why? Because think of it. In God's world, there is nothing but God. The only truth is God, His existence, because He is existence. In order to give you free will, the Baruch have to make another choice. Another choice meaning the possibility of not believing in God. How do you do that? How does God disappear? Where does He hide? That's the only way free choice is possible. This is an enormous problem that the Baruch has. Unless the Baruch resolves this problem, and He did it in the most subtle way, and we will discuss this way tonight, how He did this. But unless He does this, there is absolutely no possibility of free choice. It's not possible, you see. In the middle of the daytime, you see, with the sun glaring in your face, go choose night. It's ridiculous. If light is precious, no one will choose its absence. When one is confronted with the light, it's the same thing. If the manifestation of God is absolutely evident, no one will choose an alternative. Another alternative is not possible. Why don't you think the Malachim have any free choice? They have a self, they have an ability of consciousness. Why don't they have free choice? Because how can you have free choice where the presence of God is absolutely manifest and imminent? There's nowhere else. When a Malachim looks straight, and what he perceives is the koyach of the Baruch Shalom, what? He's going to choose something else? How? It's not possible. A Malach doesn't think for a second of another alternative. There is no other alternative. It's the biggest laugh of a Malach. When a Malach looks at a man, and he sees you choosing something, the Malach can't understand it. Of course not. Because the Malach lives in broad daylight. They can't understand why you're running after darkness. You see. But what the Malach doesn't understand is the incredible subtlety that the Baruch did, in that the Baruch created darkness. The Baruch never created light. If you look at the book, it says, Yotzei Or U'Vorach Choshech. God formed the light and created darkness. He only formed light. He didn't create light. He only formed it. Its substance was already there. Why? Where? Its substance is the Baruch Himself. Since He took light or truth and simply formed it in different ways. But there never existed darkness. So darkness had to be created from scratch, from nothing. You see, Yotzer Or, he formed life u'borei choshech, but he created darkness. Because darkness was not an existing thing. It never was. You see, that was the problem of God. How do you create darkness? Well, that's a simple thing. But it's not simple. Because darkness in its real form means the absence of divinity. It's the absence of the presence of the incredibly powerful presence of God. How does God hide? That's the subtle question. So in order to hide, what the Bonisham did, he created what's called the Satan. The Satan is a malach who has the ability, you see, to convince you that God has hidden and that there is no God. That problem was resolved by creating a force called darkness and implanting it in the Satan as the chief angel of the thing. You see, that's what happened. Now how does God do that really? How does he conceal his presence? The answer is he doesn't. That is the amazing thing. He doesn't. You don't know this. And this is even, I want to give you a third example. Let's say, for example, a person is not home and he's hungry. He walks to a Chinese restaurant and he sits down outside eating Chinese food. Now, I've eaten kosher Chinese food, so I know that Chinese food is very good. Okay. Person eats plates of Chinese food, whatever have you. You know what he's really eating? He's really eating yichud in the form of matter. That's really what it is. It sounds weird, but that's mamish what it is. Yichud in the form of matter is Chinese food. Yichud in the form of sound is exquisite music. Yichud in the form of sight is beautiful art. Yichud in the form of structure is incredible landscape. The universe. It's all yichud in different forms. God hid himself very simply by taking that yichud, by taking his absolute unity and his koyach, and simply converting it or transforming it with a mask. But the power behind that mask is always his yichud. Always the yichud. But the mask conceals that, you see. What it is, it's a mask with a filter, let's say. So it looks like it's white light, but it comes out as green light because there's a green filter. In another thing, it's red light, or whatever have you. So it always looks different. But fundamentally, it's always the white light behind the filter. Always. When God hides in the filter, even though the light is still coming down, God hasn't changed anything. He doesn't hold himself back. He simply introduces new filters. Hence it looks differently and it confuses you. You say, well, if I see white light, then you instantly know God. But if you see green light is not God, neither is red light or purple light. These are different shades of different things. That is a subtle thing. You see. Olam Haba is nothing more than a place where those filters will be finally and forever removed. There will only be white light, you see. Hence the enjoyment is much more powerful, infinitely more powerful. That's all. There's no difference between any taiva that you will have now, anyone, and the one that you will experience then. The difference is in the filter. Here you experience it with an enormous filter on it, so this gives you the delusion, or rather the illusion, you see, that there is no yichud here. And that I'm able to take this power and usurp it to myself. That's an illusion. The Buddhism takes his own life and from his very life fashions the mask so that it's no longer recognizable. But that's the way it must be. Why? Because darkness cannot live without light. Nothing can survive without God existing. Even the sun. In order for all these powers to exist, whose function is to distort truth, you see, what the Bonisham does, he must first imbue it with a ray of truth, because they're his creation, and then transform it so it's no longer recognizable as to its origin. It is the origin which is hidden, you see. Not the pleasure. Not the pleasure at all. When God said that Olam Haba will be based on the perception of my yichud, you know what that means? That means that the only way to have any kind of hanor, the only way to have any kind of pleasure or satisfaction, could only come from the perception of that hanor. There are two forces in the world, two forces that were created, or actually exist. There's the force of evil, and there's the force of good. That's it. All pleasure in the world can only come from the force of good. All pain comes from the force of evil. Evil, or choshech, or the Satan, cannot give pleasure. It doesn't lie within its power. You see, darkness, tumor, whatever you want to call it, it is a power which is created darkness. It can only give pain. That's all it can give. Within the substance, within its parameters, it doesn't have the ability to give pleasure at all. Tov does not have the ability to give pain. These are extremely monolithic forces. Neither can give that which is the domain of the other. Do we understand that? You understand that rule? This is a very important rule. All pleasure, right, comes from the koach of kedusha. Only all pain in every form must come from the koach of ra or tumah. Tumah means impurity. Kedusha means holiness, right? Tumah means impurity. That which is impure. It's an impure force. All pleasure can only come from light, from holiness. Pain can only come from evil. But the question is this: if that's true, then how is it possible for the Satan to seduce anybody? If the Satan, who's an agent of evil, wants to seduce you, he must give you pleasure. He cannot give you pleasure. He cannot seduce you to go away from God unless he gives you some kind of a pleasure. You see, how does he do that? Where does he take the ability to give pleasure? The Yetzer Hara, or the Satan, is a force of evil, and his whole purpose is to seduce you away from God. But to seduce you away from God, he must give you some form of pleasure, or else why are you going to move away? So what the Baruch Hu is creating in darkness an ability to give pleasure. But darkness does not have the ability to give pleasure. It's not within its structure. How does it work? Very simple. Darkness makes a deposit on the bank of Tov, Kedusha, withdraws the funds, and then uses that to give pleasure. In other words, the Yetzer Hara, in order to give you a sense of pleasure, borrows from light, or from God's yichud itself. He borrows from God's power directly, transforms it, and then gives you a pleasure in a hidden form. And that's how he seduces you. Because he makes you think that this pleasure, it doesn't belong to God. Rather, it belongs to you. It's your body. You command the pleasure. It's something which gives you the importance. You gain a sense of power and esteem, you see, because it belongs to you. That's an illusion. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to God. The Baruch Hu gives the power of what? Of Tumah, the ability to borrow this Kedusha, to create that illusion. When it doesn't borrow it, all it does is create pain. That's all. What causes pain in the world? Anytime you feel pain or suffering, in any form, whether it's a physicalness, whether it's mental anguish, whatever it is, that pain can only come from the Satan. He is the only being who can administer pain. There is no malach in the Shemayim. There is no force in all creation that can administer pain. Why? Because he has the power of darkness, of tumah, and that's where pain comes from. But he also has the power to administer pleasure. Where does he take that? Because he has the power to draw on the bank of Kedusha. And by doing that, he can give both pain and pleasure. Pain that he gives is his real koyach. The pleasure that he gives, he borrows from yichud. See? Do we understand this? It is a very subtle thing. You don't realize that when you're enjoying enjoying food to the body is every different type of taiva. Everyone. Whether it's anything which gives you esteem, anything gives body pleasure in any sense, whether it's eating, whether it's sexual pleasures, esteem, every one of these things are built on yichud and kedusha. It would take me quite a while to explain how each one is constructed from yichud. That's a whole shiur unto itself. But it is. But you don't know it. You have no idea that when you're involved with something pleasurable, you're actually playing with yichud in some way and imbibing tremendous kedusha in a transformed light. It doesn't appear that way because it makes you feel great as an individual, by yourself. It makes you feel as your own person, like you have command and control, you see. It heightens your own sense of self, your own sense of self-importance. So it doesn't make sense how these pleasures have anything to do with God or the submission of a will to a higher being. You see, when you're enjoying yourself, you're not thinking of submitting yourself to a higher will. You're not thinking of relating to a higher force. You see, you're not thinking of those terms. You're thinking of getting it now and making myself feel good. You see, so you say, well, how does such a feeling have to do with yichud? You see, that's the confusion. The truth of the matter is, it is yichud in a transformed state and has the ability to give the illusion of self, the importance of self. That's why someday, when all this is taken away, you will suddenly see yichud for what it really was. And if you did not distinguish between these two yichudim, and I'll call them now, it's a good idea to remember these two words. One is called Yichud HaMizgaleh. What does Yichud HaMizgaleh mean? Yichud means the unity of God, or the power of Baruch HaMizgaleh, which is revealed. The other is called Yichud, or the power of God, HaMistateh, which is hidden. It comes from Esther. This means hidden, this means revealed. This is the pleasure of Adam Haba, and the pleasure of the spiritual. This is the pleasure of this world, the pleasure of your body, and everything which is connected to your body. Do you notice? You notice how they're really the same thing? Both are yichud, both are the powers of God. The only difference is that one is revealed, mizgaleh, the other is hidden, mistateh. But both is God's insignia, but it doesn't appear that way. If you remember what I say, if you understand what I say, to some extent, you will realize from now on that every time you're having yourself a good time in terms of your own bodily experience, and it makes you feel separate from God, or it makes you feel like your own person, if you think, wait a minute, it's an illusion. Because the ability to experience pleasure can only come through God Himself. That's what it means. God is the only source of real pleasure on all. There is no other source of it. There is no source. Any type of pleasure you feel, you are borrowing it from God. In some way you are plugging into the Baruch Shalom. There is no other way. Yet you can plug into Him in two ways. You can plug directly into Him and experience the pleasure, and at the same time also the reverence and awe. The fact that the origin of this pleasure is coming from a higher force, God. Or you can plug into God, and as you plug in along the way, it's transformed. So that it gives you the pleasure, but with a feeling of self-importance. Of number one. Looking after number one. You see. But in both cases, it is yichud. That's not an easy thing to do. You see. It's not an easy thing to do. The deeper you understand it, and we will go into these things much deeper, the more powerful the ability to understand what's really happening. That's why I say that the most subtle deception that you will ever have in your life is this concept. It is a very subtle deception, because you can go through the entire life and never realize what the real origin of all your bodily pleasures are. and the real illusion that it creates. Even though it creates an illusion of separation, it really comes from the same power as all the spiritual forces. There is no difference. The only difference is the filter. That's all it is. But that filter has a tremendous ability to create an illusion. That filter is what hides God. He created that filter because He wants to be hidden. He wants you to think, maybe I don't exist. He wants you to do that because He wants you to think about this. He wants you to look at yourself and really evaluate who is more important. What should be the true goal in life? What is your real relationship to the world out there, to reality, and to God who created it? He wants you to think that. So in order to do that, He had to hide Himself. And He said to the Sultan, go for it. Do whatever you can to suit that guy. I will give you all my power. Transform it. Try and take them away from me. Because I need you to try to take them away from me, because then when they battle you, and they win, and they refuse to go away from me, that is their Olam Haba. Then they will get the true light, without the filters. And that's the reward, which they will have earned. Because they will have fought for the light, directly. You see, that's what Namak Sufa is all about. That's what it's all about. That God wants you to earn your own keep. He does that by manifesting Himself in two forms, open and closed. You see, that's the entire test. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, not everyone is taken away from Hashem through pleasure. What about people who leave through pain themselves?
That's something else. That's another thing, right?
Will you talk about that?
I will. Right. First, let me just.
Okay.
I will get to that. This is right through the seduction through pleasure. Okay. Most people are taken away through that.
Right.
Yeah, but there is that other thing, right? That's something else. That's through that the yichud. This, by the way, comes. This dichotomy, this duality. What created this? The Hanogas HaMishpat and the Hanogas HaYichud. What do you want to say? Let's show hands. Who wants to say the Hanogas HaMishpat?
Created by.
This duality. Was this duality created by the Hanogas HaMishpat? Okay. Who says the Hanogas HaMishpat? Okay, the Hanogas HaMishpat? Okay, the Hanogas HaYichud. Only world out there, what? What is the reason for the Hanogas HaYichud? Why do you think it's the Hanogas HaYichud?
Because it shows the illusion, and it shows the hiddenness.
But what's the purpose of it? What's the purpose of the illusion? What's concerned with the teaching of Namak Sufa directly through Bechira? Hanogas HaMishpat. This is Hanogas HaMishpat. Even though it's an illusion, whenever you're concerned with giving the possibility of a test so that man can earn it, that's always justice or din. This is the Hanogas HaMishpat only. Justice. Yeah. Mishpat. Okay.
Why does He decide to reveal Himself at various times through history, like at Sinai or
Yes.
miracles?
Yes. Okay. Well, it's not that God chooses to reveal Himself. God does not choose to reveal Himself or conceal Himself throughout history, depending on His situation. In the beginning of the creation of the world, God created a certain ratio. There's a certain amount of light to a certain amount of darkness. You see, it's a ratio. That ratio, let's say, is a 50-50 ratio, and it's sacred. The person does not want to trample on that ratio, because that ratio is needed for free will. God has to give just enough light and just enough darkness to balance each other out, right? So that you will have free will, a 50-50 composition, you see. If the Buddhism gave too much light, what would happen to free will? There would be lost. You would automatically choose Buchnias. If he gave too much darkness, then you would choose the other way. You couldn't sustain it. So the Buddhism has to give the exact balance. And at the beginning of creation, that exact balance was established. It is a specific ratio between these two yichudim, between his yichud, his power open, and his power closed, so that there's a proper balance in free will. But throughout time, that balance does change. Why? We change it. We do it through our meisim. When I say we change it by activating another hanaga, the hanagas hayichud. It is the hanagas hayichud that tampers with this original ratio. That's really what the essence of the hanagas hayichud is. It will begin to tamper with this ratio. What is the reason for that? We'll get into that. The original ratio, the fundamental ratio, the basic 50-50 proposition ratio between the two is established at the beginning by the Hanagas HaMishpah. Over time, as man does more and more mitzvahs, if man listens to God and he attempts to get closer to Ruchnius, he attempts to get closer to what? To Kedusha, to Torah, to understand, to interact and to relate with God. If he attempts to establish an intimate relationship between himself and God, what happens? Then this ratio will be altered, you see, towards the light. If man does not follow that way, then it will be altered towards the darkness. Now, this connects to what we said last week. What's the pattern of history? In this simple diagram, you begin to see what the process of history itself is. The ultimate goal is to establish a situation called Olam Haba, the future world. It is a situation whose essential property or whose essential nature is one of Gilu Yehudot, or the revelation of his unity. It is a place when we be able to experience the Baruch's pleasure directly. And by experience directly, we will have the most ecstatic possible experience known to human consciousness. You see, that's the ultimate goal. God says, I want to give you the experience of my power directly, so that you will experience the highest form of consciousness and ecstasy that's possible. That's the goal. Okay? But the Baruch says, I'm not going to give you this for nothing. I want you to work for it. You see? I want you to choose. I want you to choose your relationship with me. I want to see if you want to relate with me or not. Depending on whether or not how you establish your relationship with me, if you come close to me or if you go far away from me, that will determine what your status will be in that future world. Because the whole thing of the future world is your closeness to me. That's really what it is. But God says, I give you the choice if you want to be close to me or not. You see. How does he do that? Well, what he does, he takes the same yichud and he puts it into two forms. Two forms. One form is revealed yichud. The other form is the hidden yichud. This is the world of the body. This is the world of the soul. He combines the two, and suddenly the person finds himself in two directions. He has two things that he wants to do. He wants to somehow know the truth, but he also wants to enjoy himself. He's got these two things constantly enmeshed. And the Baruch says, choose. The way you choose depends on what you want to think about me and what you want to think about yourself. Fine. Man now goes to the choice. Now, remember, in the future world, there will only be revealed yichud. Okay? Gilu yichud means revealed. Okay? That is all that will exist in the future world. If you choose me, get close to me, you see, you will be choosing the revealed will, yichud. As you choose that, what I will do is the following. I will begin to shift the ratio of revealed to hidden. And gradually, this will disappear. You know what I just said? You choose between this or that. If you choose to reveal yichud, if you become tzaddikim, and you're honest, and you're good to each other, and you seek truth, you see, then you will gradually reveal the Yichud to yourself, and what you will do is, you yourself will create a situation of a world where there's only revealed Yichud. I will change this 50-50 ratio, which is at the outset, right, to create a situation of free choice, and you will change the ratio. If you choose in the direction of me, the world will slowly begin to reflect this side of the Yichud. And by the time you're finished, what will have happened? You will have created the world of revealed Yichud. But what is the world of revealed Yichud? That's the ultimate objective. In other words, God says, you have the ability to literally get rid of the hidden Yichud and convert the world to a revealed Yichud. You see what I'm saying? You have that ability yourself. That's the Hanogas HaMishpat. What the Hanogas HaMishpat says, even though I created the world with two Yichuds, I give you the ability to choose the two, and if you choose the correct one, you will wipe the other one out. And as you wipe the other one out, the good one, or the revealed Yichud, will become the dominant one. And that itself is exactly what the goal is. Thus, you will create Olam Haba. You will create the perception of my unity and the greatest hana, pleasure, from your own effort. Does everyone understand this? That is strict justice. That is din, mishpat. You see, that is cause and effect relationship. You will have enforced this and ruled that by your deeds. Doing that, you will actually create the future world by your own hands. What happens if you don't choose this way, instead of you do this? Right? Let's say you choose the hidden Yichud. Let's say you go after all the things of the body. You go after yourself, your own selfish interest. You're not interested in the truth. You're not interested in what's good and what's proper. Only what makes you feel good. What happens? Then God says the following. This Yichud becomes stronger, and this one will begin to disappear. Hence, by the time you're finished, you will create a world of hidden Yichud. You see? And a world of hidden Yichud cannot survive. Because that's totally contrary to what he wants. Only a world of revealed Yichud, a world where God is absolutely evident, can exist. But God says, if you change the ratio by your own hands, by what? By making the world darker and darker, you will finally wind up with a world which is absolutely dark. But a world which is absolutely dark is exactly the furthest away from what God really wanted. Hence, that world must be annihilated. So fundamentally, what strict justice says, I give you the choice of which side of the ratio this will go to. You will determine which side of the balance becomes the dominant one. If you choose the good side, the revealed Yichud, then the world will shift over to that, and it will become a manifestation of revealed Yichud, and that is Olam Haba. If you choose the other side, the world of the body, if you choose my Yichud in the filter, and you fall for the illusion, you will bring darkness on the world. That will be a world which must be annihilated, because such a world has no future. You determine what the just and good law is. God says, I am the judge, and you are the defendant. I leave it up to you. You will determine what my ruling will be. Do we understand this? That is the Hanogas HaMishpat in its essence. That's how it functions. It says, we will give you what you have earned. No more, no less. If you have earned revealed Yichud, you will earn revealed Yichud, because you will have created. If you concentrate on hidden Yichud, you will have earned hidden Yichud. But hidden Yichud must be annihilated. Hence, you will have earned your own destruction. The choice is in your hands. You see? Do we understand this? That's the Hanogas HaMishpat. In that case, the world must destroy itself if the people in the world choose the wrong way. But what about the Hanogas HaYichud? Enter the Hanogas HaYichud. And the Hanogas HaYichud does a very interesting thing. It says, wait a minute, let's change the choices. If you reveal God's Yichud, you will earn God's Yichud. We understand that. But what happens if you choose God's hidden yichud in illusory thinking that this is your koyach? You will have used His power to promote your own selfishness. What happens? Then you should produce a world of hidden yichud, right? Yes, and you do produce it. But what the Anokas HaYichud says the following: I will take that world of hidden yichud, and from that world of hidden yichud, I will see to it that it eventually uncovers itself to a revealed yichud. In other words, I will bring this destination from either this side of the formula or that side. Your deeds change the ratio, either this way or that way. That must be like that. That's not a mishpat. You control the dial into the center. You control if the dial goes this way or if the dial goes that way. You see, what the Hanokas HaYichud says is that should you see to it that the dial goes that way and bring the world to destruction, I will save it nevertheless. From the very darkness, I will eventually bring the revelation. But I've got to use a different process to do it. You see. That's what the Hanokas HaYichud does. What it does is it superimposes itself on this structure and does not allow this option to destroy the world. Rather it says, I will take that option and I will save it from the darkness itself. Do we see the exact relationship between the two Hanokas? You see that? That is the precise relationship between these two Hanokas. How they really Yichud, and that is the job of the Hanokas HaMishpat. The Hanokas HaYichud, the job of the Hanokas HaMishpat is to go either in this part or that part. Do your effort. You see. If you go this way, you will then lead to the goal. If you go this way, then you will lead to annihilation. You see. If you choose revealed yichud, you go to revealed yichud, Olam Haba. If you choose hidden yichud, you will be annihilated. That's what the Hanokas HaMishpat says. This is the Hanokas HaMishpat. Do you understand that? Hanokas HaYichud says, wait a minute. Let's lead this thing also that way. This arrow, right? This double arrow is the Hanokas HaYichud. You see what I'm saying? This arrow. Everything else is Hanokas HaMishpat. Do we see it clearly? Are there any words that are confusing here in each translation? You feel free to ask. Is there a word that needs some translation? Do we understand the process? So the Hanokas HaYichud has the incredible task and ability to literally take from darkness and create light. It changes that option. The arrow should go here, towards annihilation. But the Hanokas HaYichud says, wait, let's go from here to here. It's a kind of a summary of what I've done last week in slightly different terms. You see. Again, because the thing is, what I'm doing is I am coming from three different directions to the same spot. And I've got to do it. Because I've got to engrave this in your mind. You see. What you must understand clearly is exactly how the Hanokas HaMishpat works, its alternatives and its options, and then how the Hanokas HaYichud superimposes itself to alter a certain section of the Hanokas HaMishpat. You see, remember, the Hanokas HaYichud does not become activated. It does not become activated unless what? Unless what? What? Exactly. Unless this arrow exists. This arrow will not exist. You see what I'm saying? There's no necessity for it. If mankind goes this way and this way, that's fine. This becomes activated only when the arrow goes here. Then suddenly this is activated. That's number one. You see. Number two, the Anagata Yichud only works from that part. Once this is done, then it's activated and then it begins to work on the Choshech itself, on the darkness itself. And from the darkness it brings the light in its own way. But it only fits in this segment. Everything in this diagram that you see here is Anagata Mishpat. This is strict justice working. The 50-50, the possibility of two directions, and the alternatives for both of these directions, the consequences. You see. This is all mishpat. This is all justice. You see. Yichud only comes in under one strict condition. When this happens, and then it begins to move in a direction. It takes the annihilative process, the destructive process, and from that itself begins to build the light on its own in a different way. That's why it's called the Hanogata Yichud. Why is it called the Hanogata Yichud? Because fundamentally, what is its objective? To guarantee what? Yichud. You see? That's why it's called the Hanogata Yichud. It guarantees Yichud. How does it guarantee it? It says, either you do it yourself, or I will do it for you this way. But I guarantee that someday there will be a situation of Yichud. What kind of Yichud? Hidden Yichud or revealed Yichud? Revealed Yichud. Yichud HaMizgaleh. That which is the white light, not the green light or the red light. You see, it's not the Yichud in bodily pleasures. It's not the Kedusha in the body. It's the Kedusha of the Neshama in the direct perception of the Kedusha itself. You see, think for a second. Please think for a second. If the power of Yichud is so enormous that it's able to entice you so subtly and so seductively through the body, and it's only a microcosm of what it really is, can you imagine the pleasure you will have when you deal with the direct Yichud itself? If the power of Yichud is such that it's able to give you such pleasure with an illusion when it's covered up, what kind of hanoah can you get when it's not covered up? Do you see what I'm saying? This is a measure of the difference between Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh. I want to give you some measure. I'm not going to talk about a place which is abstract, which exists somewhere far off in the future, which nobody can understand. No. I'm going to talk about Olam Hazeh, the future world, now. And I'm going to show you that it doesn't exist in the future world as such. It already exists now. Your very ability to experience pleasure is Olam Haba with a filter. That's what I want to show you. There's no hidden future promises. You see, I'm showing you what you're going to get now from what you already have. And with that, once you understand that, I now draw the logical conclusion. If this is what you're going to have now, you see, when the Yichud is hidden and tied down and controlled, you see, can you imagine what your pleasure will be, or the sense of your awareness when that Yichud is what? Totally free, uninhibited, pure, unadulterated light? Could you begin to imagine what that is? If God can, if the Rebbeinu Shalom could inspire you with every faculty of bodily desires, and that's his Yichud in the most hidden form, could you begin to imagine what he can do when he works with it openly and directly? Take any pleasure that you have now and multiply it, you see, with a factor of 10 to the 20th decimal, or something like that. Then you begin, and then keep that going to the end of time. Okay? That's Olam Haba. That's what you're choosing. That's what we mean by hidden Yichud, revealed Yichud. Choose Yichud. Understand the Yichud of the body now, and understand what you're doing. Don't let it seduce you. Don't let it entice you. You see. And you will be zeicher for a real Yichud. Choose the other Yichud. The small Yichud. The transient one that only lasts a very short period of time before it's gone. And that's all you'll have, really. Because even when another Yichud interferes, it cannot bring you up to what you should have gotten here. It can barely save your skin. You see. That's all it really does. It saves your skin. But it will not give you the palace that you will so richly deserve if you work for it in this way. You cannot compare the two roads. You see. That's the option. That's what you must think of. You see. This is what's clearly in front of you. These are real choices to be made. And these are real consequences to be suffered or rewarded. And if you say, why should I work for something that I don't know anything about? Why? Why? You tell me that there's something called Olam Haba. The place which it's going to be a pleasurable experience. It's going to be a joy and a simcha. But let's face it. One bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Right? Go argue with that. Isn't that true? I'm living now. I'm enjoying myself now. I've got it what it is now. Why should I run after something that I don't even know about? It's hidden to me. Something obscure, nebulous, vague pleasure that you're talking about that I cannot relate to. You see. So why should I go after that? Why? Because you say so? Because you promised me that? It's too indefinite. I'm sorry. That's why I don't talk in those terms. I say to you what you can understand now. You see. You're not running after something obscure or vague. You're running after what you're experiencing now, multiplied by a magnitude of thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Because what you're experiencing now is exactly what you experience later on, without filters. You want to know what Olam Haba is about? I'll tell you what it's about. Look at what you're enjoying now. Whatever brings you pleasure, enjoyment now, and the simcha, you see, it will bring you that pleasure in different form later on. But the root is the same. It's always yichud. Why? Because all simcha, all happiness and contentment, all pleasure can only come from God, nowhere else. And it comes from Him directly. You see, you cannot have a bodily pleasure unless not only He wills it, unless He gives it the power. You see, because the power to produce pleasure comes from whole, good. Pleasure in whatever form is good. Hence, its origin must be kedusha or holiness. You see. If you feel pleasure from that which seems to be illegal, or that which seems to be utter, prohibited, it's because the Banisham says, don't experience that pleasure. I don't want you to experience that pleasure. Why? Because I've got something much richer for you, much better for you. It's really the same thing, structurally, you see. But it's not what I want to give you. It's too small. It's too little. It's too transient. It's too ephemeral. It's too short-lived. It's too evanescent. It will leave very quickly, and you will be left with nothing. You see, choose the eternal pleasure. Choose the pure, the white light, not the green light, you see, or the purple light. The white light itself. That's what I want to give you. But in order to do that, I must ask you to just hold yourself, sustain yourself, you see. Withhold yourself from this hidden pleasure, from this illusion, you see. Don't pick up the illusion with its pleasure. Don't do that. Realize that in that pleasure it comes from me. Hence, what? Hence you will realize that either way, I'm the one that you must relate to. If Adam Rishon had realized this, if Adam Rishon, when he was in the Gan, had looked at the Eitz Hadas, when he saw it and he experienced a desire for it, obviously, God gave him a desire for it, but he didn't understand that desire. When he looked at the Eitz Hadas, he saw now that it would give him enormous wisdom, the wisdom to give him an incredible sense of self-importance, almost to be like a God. You see, that was so enticing. You see, the possibility of total individuation, total independence, true power was so enticing that he said, wait a minute, maybe I should go after this. But if Ultimate sat down to think and wait a minute, he says, like, wait a minute, where is this coming from? This pleasure. It's a pleasure which separates. But wait a minute, where can pleasure come from but God Himself? This is a test. This is a construction which God has made to see if I will fall into the trap. It's ridiculous. Even when I try and go away from God, even when I think I'm going away from God, I'm really choosing His yichud. There's an absurdity in this choice. There's an absurdity here. What am I doing? I'm saying to myself, let me choose this Eitz Hadas here, the tree of knowledge, and let me experience the tremendous power of myself. But wait a minute. But this tremendous power of myself is really, in a hidden form, the power of God. You see. So I'm going to experience the power of God. Let me plug into the direct source. Why plug into the illusory source, you see? You see what I'm saying? If he had understood that, if he had realized that, we would be in a totally different position today, all of us. But unfortunately he didn't. Unfortunately he was fooled. He went after the hidden yichud because he thought that the hidden yichud was a source of power, a source of pleasure unto itself, and could separate him, could make him a truly divine being by giving him a certain sense of independence. That's what he thought. But it was the illusion he ran after. What he forgot was that the origin of the illusion is God himself. And hence the origin of the power, the origin of pleasure is God, attempting to seduce him. If he had understood that, he would have sustained himself. He would have withheld. And had he done that, he would have done what? He would have changed the fundamental ratio from a 50 to 50 to 100-0. 100 on this side, 0 on that side. He would have literally with his own hands created the situation of Olam Haba. He would have brought it to this level at the outset. Because he failed to do that. We must all repeat that constantly and undo the damage in which he's done. You see. Because we are all part of him. All of us. We're all fragments of what he used to be. So each in our own little ways must undo that damage. So throughout our lives we are given many choices constantly to test between the two yichudim. Always. Always test it. To choose once and for all what that true yichud is. Any questions? Yes.
I don't know quite how to word it, but
okay, do the best you can.
Yeah, but the thing, there are pleasures that are within Kedusha that we have here.
Directly, yes.
So how does that?
But yes, because there's, even though they're within Kedusha, they're still hidden. Because they're minor. They're not as strong filters as the other pleasures, but they still have enormous filters on them. Because relative to Olam Haba,
but they're not pulling us away. They're
no,
pulling us
towards,
towards.
yes. Because of that, they're relative hidden yichudim, but they're really, as far as we're concerned, they're like revealed. You know what he's saying is a very good point. Even in this life, we can feel the simcha and the certain pleasure in ruchnius, in attaching ourselves to spirituality. That's true. The question that is being asked here, what's the nature of that pleasure? What's the nature of the pleasure that when we daven or when we learn? What's the nature of your pleasure when you're sitting here listening to the shir? Because this is a manifestation of yichud. What is that form? Really? You see? The answer is, that is really a revealed yichud. It is. But it still has aspects of a hidden yichud. Because whatever I can say is nothing compared to what the real light is. I can only show you a glimpse of that white light. Only a glimpse of it. A spark. You see. So in a sense, it's still hidden. But it is a true yichud. Because it connects to the true yichud. You see. That's the point. Yes?
About this idea of the hidden yichud. When you talk about, borrowed pleasure, let's assume, with someone who's involved in a real avera.
Yeah.
Let's assume the man's committing adultery.
Okay.
So how do you handle that kind of situation in terms of this?
Who? How does who handle it? The man is committing adultery?
Well, especially talking about borrowed pleasure. He may be getting a lot of pleasure out of it.
Yeah.
Okay? Or something of that nature. Or he's stealing. Okay?
Right.
He's fraudulent.
Whatever it is,
He
yeah.
enjoys it.
Yeah.
But he enjoys it.
Yeah.
He enjoys just committing fraud. He's
Yeah.
getting away with it.
Yeah.
His form of his pleasure.
Yeah.
How do you
Because the point is that pleasure is in a sense an assertion of one's own selfishness and one's own power, statement about oneself. It's saying that I'm the most important thing and the only truth is my truth. That's what all these acts are. Every one of these acts is saying, I am the only truth that's worth fighting for. It's an analysis of that statement, which is the basic premise. One must analyze that statement and realize that's a totally false statement. You see, when one begins to see that the adultery, or whatever he's involved in, the embezzlement, is nothing more than a certain way of looking at himself and looking at the world. If he begins to see that, and he begins to see, wait a minute, the question, is this true? Is this the right way? He begins to realize, you see, that this is an illusion. But that ultimately behind all of it, the experience of anything, is the fact that God is giving him a test him to do what he wants to do, to subvert pleasurable experiences into that which gives him a certain illusion. But he has to try and break through that, you see, and realize the really fundamental question. What does he want to think about himself? How does he want to relate to truth? Does he want to put himself up as the number one thing? Is the only truth that's sacred to this person is the truth of his own wants and his own ego? That's what's really at stake here. If that's the truth he wants to live by, then he'll continue to do this. And his body will support that, the illusion. But if he wants to say to himself, wait a minute, this is not right. This is the wife of another man. Or, this is my body. But there's a soul here. There's a whole other way of seeing reality. There's a whole other way of experiencing the truth. I have to understand what I'm here for. Why was I created? Who made me? What is my ultimate direction? What am I supposed to be doing? You see, what truth is out there that I should be exploring? The truth of myself or the truth of a higher reality? If he thinks about this aspect, he'll begin to see that the pleasure of the body, you see, is a false kind of pleasure because it leads to a certain type of illusion. And as he begins to understand the nature of God, slowly begin to dawn on him that even the pleasures of the body is constructed by God to test him. But he's got to go into this whole thinking process. You see what I'm saying? It's not an easy one.
But let's assume he doesn't get this truth. Alright, so how does it affect all of this?
Well, isn't that the function of pain then? Is that the function of pain is then to realize that the pleasure is not really the pleasure, and that's where suffering comes in.
Right.
To go towards the
In essence, he's going this way, right? Right? Which means that another thing, yichud will begin to be activated. In its activation, it will begin to deal with the problem in a whole different way. And one of the ways that it deals with, it begins to bring suffering on the person. It begins to say, you think that you're all powerful? Let's see how you handle this. Let's make you very, very vulnerable. Let's take away this divine illusion. And suddenly, you will see that you're at the mercy of forces which are vastly superior to you. You see what I'm saying? That's what begins to happen. God says, you want to make yourself into a little God? Let's handle that. I'm the big God. You want to battle me? Let's go. See? And what he begins to do, he begins to limit your existence. Minimize it. Suddenly you begin to see things fail. Things happen. All kinds of things happen after a while that begin to change your focus. You see? Life begins to deteriorate to a certain extent. And this sense of importance, or the sense of oneself, becomes diminished by the simple fact that one becomes a victim of life. One thought, the person thought that he controlled life, the fact that he could take whatever he wants, suddenly he finds himself running away from life, not towards it, because more and more he's becoming a victim of more and more greater and greater misfortune. You see? So one learns the lesson either way. Learn the lesson that way, or learn the lesson this way. You see? Either way, you will learn what the true yichud is. Yes?
How come then, if somebody is going towards the reveal all their life, and still Hashem could throw down more and more pain and suffering?
Yes. Okay. Obviously there are deviations that yes. Because all these according to the structure that I've created, this is the Hanavas HaMishpat, right? It's the Hanavas HaYichud which does all that. This obviously is not what the world looks like, really. Obviously. Which means that this picture is distorted. You see. There are many good people out there who suffer enormously, and many bad people who are very successful. What's happening? This. That's when we have to begin to explore even further. By understanding this structure, we are now at the point where we begin to analyze that structure. This is our Haga, which turns everything topsy-turvy, to see to it that the world is saved from its own annihilation. You see. How that does that is what we have to explore further. But first we must understand the relationship of Mishpat to the Hanavas HaYichud. That's first and foremost. Because as we see, this is nothing more than an offshoot of all this. This is not activated unless this is the main picture, right? This is activated as a safety system, you see.
but it's more than that because it's not. Even if somebody's going towards the light, somehow it's
But
not
this-
like strictly
No,
simple.
always fine. It deals with both. Why that is what I have to say. One more question and that's it.
But the moment before Adam ate the apple, he was in all light.
No, he wasn't. How can he be?
Because he-
Of course. Then what would there be a choice?
Well,
No.
he had the choice all along.
No, he had it as soon as he was born. Adam
For
Rishon was
1,000 years, he didn't choose the easiest.
no. Adam Rishon was created Friday morning, right? What? He was created on Friday, and he was given 6 hours for the choice. That's all. And he chose in 6 hours, he would have created this. That's it. He didn't have no 1,000 years, and he was created right away with the 50-50 ratio. Okay.
Just a quick matter of degree. How far do we have to get, to annihilation when the Yichud start working?
Instantly.
I mean, is that
Instantly. As soon as this goes up one point,
okay?
instantly that's activated.
Okay.
Instantly.
And this could be
We're going
to
to
an individual and the whole.
yes, we're going to go into this further. What's called the inverse ratio of the two. How these two act. We'll get a good to understand this. I tried to really go through this. Gotta remind me, Oh, take care.